Welcome to Law Chat with Girija, my entrepreneur friends. I'm Girija Parka Patel, and I'm a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister, a businesswoman, a lawyer, and an entrepreneur, just like you. I believe in the power of storytelling and mentorship through stories. Whether 6 months in or 20 years in their journey, entrepreneurs have impactful experiences to share, which are full of mistakes and full of victories. And my goal is to highlight those and to celebrate the diverse narratives and perspectives in the world of entrepreneurship, which inevitably provides motivation, encouragement, and inspiration to our community and to our own journey. So Law Chat's purpose is not just to share the expected conversations about their businesses and journey, but also I want to share and dive deep into their details. Get nosy, get personal, and learn from their pivotal journey and their mistakes. And also, again, their victories. So I'm here to use those moments to inspire and to motivate you on your own journey. And of course, we can't run away from the law. After all, this is Law Chat with Girija. So let's dive in.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited for today's Law Chat episode with Catherine, aka Kat Schmoyer. It's such an honor and privilege to have her on Law Chat with Girija. If you don't already know her, let me take a moment and introduce you to her. She's a mom of 2 beautiful kiddos, under 2. She's a wife. She's a founder of 3 different brands, including Creative at Heart. She's a coach, a course creator, and a cheerleader for creative biz owners, and all in all, a mompreneur who is serving other mompreneurs. Kat's work exudes her passion and energy in serving others, and I am having a fangirl moment. We had a moment to have a conversation beforehand, and it's like hard to contain myself sometimes.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy.
Welcome.
It's so awkward to hear somebody read your bio. I'm like, where do I look? Like, what do I do with my hands?
I get it, and I almost felt like that might happen, but you know what? It's kind of like, it's so nice sometimes to hear how amazing you are.
Aww.
And I think it's so nice to hear that sometimes, and I love to tell somebody that if that is who they are. But I've given an introduction. Do you want to kind of dive in and give me a little more of an introduction about yourself? And
Well, I'm just so glad to be here. So thank you so much for having me on. I don't know what else to add per se, other than I'm just excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about some various aspects of my business. And I was telling Girija before we got started, I haven't done everything perfectly in terms of like the law side, I'm sure. So I'm like kind of opening myself up in this conversation, and we'll see what happens.
you know what? That's okay. Like I was telling to you also, sometimes I also do things and I'm like, I can't believe I just did that. So
Yes.
It's totally fine. And we'll get to that later in the conversation. Why don't we start with your creative at heart? I was coming to round 10 this year and I was beyond myself. Like I was so excited to come because I have only heard the best things from anybody attending your conferences, and not only just the networking that is there, but also the energy levels and also the quality of content that you provide. So tell me from the beginning, how did you even get into Creative at Heart? How did you get into becoming a content creator and a coach? How did it start?
Creative at Heart was my baby before I had babies, is what I like to say. And I so hope that you can attend when we have Creative at Heart next year. So because of the pandemic this year, we just felt like best for everybody involved if we postponed until 2021. This is the first year that we haven't had a conference since 2015. So it does feel a little bit strange to not have that in-person element. But in terms of getting things started, I started Creative at Heart super selfishly. I started it when I was just 10 months into my own wedding planning company, and I was desperately looking for a Creative at Heart. Like I was looking for a community of women to encourage me, to lift me up, to talk to me about trial and error, business mistakes, to help me, hold me accountable. Like I just wanted to be surrounded by like-minded women, and I couldn't find it. This was, again, back in 2015. So the industry was different. Our mentality on giving freely of education, it wasn't the way it was back then. So it was really difficult to find like-minded people. So I rallied together with some friends, reached out to some educators that I'd met before, reached out to some that I hadn't met before and sent really scary emails. And we had the first conference in January. So we started building it in 2014 and then hosted our first conference in January of 2015. And it's just been like a really incredible ride, really wild adventure. We've hosted 9 conferences. Our 10th was supposed to be this year, but we're holding off until 2021 and hoping that we can have it next year. And it'll just be an incredible celebratory event when it's safe to have in-person education again.
Yeah, I definitely hope to be there as well.
I would love
All things being good and, everything like that. So before you started though in 2015, were you always an entrepreneur or did you do something else and then you shifted into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, great question. So I started my wedding planning company right after my husband and I got married in 2013. I did this super cliche thing and I planned our wedding. So I thought, well, I planned our wedding. I should plan other people's weddings. Thankfully, brides agreed with me and I was able to book clients in that first year. So wedding planning was my very first business, Dear Sweetheart Events, as an entrepreneur. Before that point, I had kind of floundered around and done a couple of different corporate jobs, not knowing what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And then wedding planning, it wasn't necessarily wedding planning that I fell in love with. It was owning my own business, and wedding planning was the avenue. So for me, it was super natural for me to then kind of pivot into creative at heart and then pivot into the Kat Schmoyer brand, like my personal brand, because I truly love owning a business and being able to think of new ideas and be creative and be innovative. And there's so many different avenues that I feel like we can do that in our lives.
So, I was perusing your website because it's so beautiful, and I'll put it in the show notes as well. It's so beautiful. But as I was going through and I was reading about you also, there was something that caught me and I felt like it really resonated with me. And I think it will resonate with a lot of other entrepreneurs also. And it was a quote that you had posted on your, I think, About Me page. And it says that 2013 is entrepreneurship and you became friends. And then you wrote, until then, I let fear lead the way. I lived my life unsure, afraid, and uninvited. And those are such powerful words, so vulnerable also, because I think it really reflects a lot of people who are searching and kind of lost, but just don't realize what they want to do until they hit that point and that aha moment. So when was that aha moment for you in each pivot that you did have or each addition to your businesses that you did have?
I love that stood out to you. That's so encouraging to me. And
Yeah.
a reminder, because we write our about pages and then we kind of leave it up there. So
Yeah.
thank you for reminding me of that. I don't necessarily think there was like one specific light bulb moment where I had that epiphany. I think it's just looking back over the course of the last few years as an entrepreneur and understanding like, okay, now I do feel invited. I do feel accepted. I do feel understood. Whereas I feel like I spent a lot of my adolescent life trying to figure out where I fit in. I did a lot of different clubs, a lot of different sports, a lot of different things that I was like, oh, I'm passionate about acting. I'm passionate about singing. About softball. Like I tried so many different things trying to figure out like, well, which group do I fit into? And I didn't fit into any of those groups. And then when I became an entrepreneur, it was like, oh, this is why. Because I personally feel like entrepreneurs can fit into a lot of different groups. Like we have so many different likes and passions and interests. So it's normal for us to want to dabble and like try so many different things. And that's how I feel like I have been able to grow my businesses is because I wanted to like bootstrap it. I wanted to DIY it and like dabble and try different things versus saying like, okay, well, this is the one path that everybody should follow.
Yeah. And that's so encouraging because it seems like you took many leaps of faith while you were doing that. And so when you're taking those leaps of faith, though, what is your anchor? What is the thing that holds you steady and grounds you, even when you are not as successful in that leap of faith as you thought you would be?
Definitely Jesus. I know this isn't faith-based, but he for sure is the foundation of my life. So for me, I want everything to be rooted in gospel truth. So even like allowing myself to believe those truths if I am failing at something in business, right? And saying like, okay, but wait, but like, let me just go back to what does this say? Like, how can I continue to lean into like his love and his kindness and his generosity for me, and therefore want to exude that in my business, even though again, my businesses aren't, quote unquote faith-based, but they are very personal businesses. Therefore my faith has a huge say in what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Honestly, also my marriage, like just having a foundation in our marriage and knowing that he's got my back, and now we're business partners, which is crazy. I never
Yeah.
thought that ever. I would have laughed at people who were like, you're business partners with your husband. Like, what? We're so different. But having that and having him really be like the yin to my yang, and we can like balance each other out. When I'm feeling stressed out or feeling anxious, like he's super steady and he doesn't tend to get stressed out and anxious. So that's just one little example, but just I think we balance each other out really well in that too.
That's wonderful. I truly believe that there should be anchors in people's lives, and whatever they call that anchor or however they refer or defer to the anchor is very important, because I think that really gives us a steady ground when we do feel challenges or when we do face challenges. Because not everything is rosy in entrepreneurship. That is a true reality. There are times when you're going to hit your face on the floor, many times actually, not just once. And you're going to be like, oh man, what just happened? Yes. Or, you know, like even me doing this podcast with you and video casting with you, it was nerve wracking for me. But then I was like, you know what? It's okay. I'm being led here. I need to do it. You know, God has my back. And so I'm kind of like, we're good. And so it's just always very interesting to me to see what other entrepreneurs use as their anchor or, you know, perceive as their anchor. So it's interesting that you said that your husband and you are partners right now, like in business. So when did that happen?
He joined the business in 2017. He left his full-time teaching position and was able to come on board. So legally, I still own the business, but he came on like he's my full-time paid employee.
I love it. I was actually going to ask you about that one.
Hey, so actually, like I'm the CEO of this, but he does so much for the business, and it's that we've both learned a lot of things together, right? And like continue bootstrap and DIY as we've grown and like tried new avenues for the company and tried to diversify our offerings and all of that fun terminology. It's been great that we've gotten to do that together. And I really feel like it's opened up our communication because we're truly doing everything together. We're raising our children together. We're growing our business together. Like we're growing our marriage together. Like there are so many commonalities that we now have.
That's so beautiful. And what a blessing to be able to share that with your spouse also. And then have you guys are like rooting each other on. So that's just so beautiful. Yeah. So I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper into these diversifications and these transitions and adding and experimenting. Like I know sometimes it can be scary, and it can also be something that overwhelming, or maybe you're just not a risk taker. But like, how do you know this is something I want to try? Or, you know, what is your process of getting to that point?
Yeah. Great question. So first of all, something that I want to put out there, because I do feel like there are different personalities that are going to be listening to this. And therefore, some of you might be hearing like taking a risk or taking that leap of faith and like you kind of cringe a little bit. I'm a big risk taker. I'm not risk averse. Like I love to take risks. It has changed as the business has grown, and the pressure on the business is more because the business is literally paying for my husband and I's salaries, right? Like there's a lot of pressure then for just our family as a whole, versus when I first started the business, I was working a full-time job and growing the business. So income wise, I had my full-time job. So the business, I could take a ton of risks because I wasn't as tied to the income coming in as I am right now. But in terms of thinking through that, I think it's important for you guys to know about me. Like I am not risk averse, and I will absolutely jump into a risk because I love it. I love like the adrenaline of it. I love trying out new ideas. But something that I've started doing within the last few years as the businesses have grown and my ideas kind of go all over the place is having the 6-month list. My friend Megan Martin and I talk about this a lot just together and then on like our own platforms. But when I get a new idea, it's so easy for us as entrepreneurs to be like, oh, I should have done this yesterday. Like, I need to do this right now before somebody else does it. And we get like anxious about it, right? Like you get this like, oh my gosh, I just need to do it right now. And like jump on this hamster wheel, when in reality, if it's really a good idea, it's still going to be a good idea in 6 months. Yeah. So what you probably need to do is pocket that good idea, look at other aspects of your business, talk with your audience, like really figure out like, is this an idea that my audience is looking for, that my business needs to pursue, whether it's a course or a digital product or hosting, you know, an in-person retreat or starting a mastermind, like whatever it is that you're thinking about doing, any offer, whether it's digital or service-based, it will likely still be a really good offer in 6 months. So pocketing that, really starting to understand, is your audience looking for that idea? You will likely be able to take that risk and know the chance of it actually panning out is more probable than if you took the risk next week and didn't do some of that back end before diving into it.
I love that. So pocketing it for 6 months and then using those 6 months to do market research, to feel your audience out, to see if your ideal client really is wanting this, or if you're adding a whole nother new client to your list or bucket list, or,
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, some things are more time sensitive, like this year in particular with the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Like some people, and you would be a great example of this, Girija, like started to create resources specific to what was going on, right? Like that was so timely because we're in a pandemic. So yes, help me figure out. I've got clients canceling. I've got all of these things that I never would have expected. So that's not something to put on the 6-month list. But outside of a pandemic, most things in your business, you can likely put on a 6-month list and then be able to know in 6 months if this is the best idea to pursue or not.
Kat, that's so true. Like, so when the pandemic happened, so April was such a pivotal month for many people because people were losing jobs. People were also like, maybe they had a reduction of work coming in. And also people just didn't know what to do. Like overall, across the board, it was confusion and there was a lot of distress. And I created this pivot guide at that time. But even though I created something for the moment of pandemic, it wasn't necessarily what my clients were looking for. And, it's like, it might be something that you're making, but even then, like, it may not be what they want because they just, A, don't know they want it, or B, they really just don't want it. And so,
Right.
I mean, I love it. I think it's amazing, but I'm kind of like, okay, that's okay. We'll put it on the side. Maybe one day somebody will want it. But but even then, you're right. Market research is so important. And I think as entrepreneurs, there's this one quote that always comes to my mind is where you're jumping out of the plane. And as you're jumping out of the plane, that's when you're figuring out how to get your parachute put together. Like you're not thinking, there's just no thinking happening.
Right.
And I think it's across the board, any industry that you might come from or be from, if you're an entrepreneur, it's like, okay, I'm diving in and then we'll figure this out. And it's a good thing, but then also it can be like, I love this, put it off for just 6 months idea.
And you can start working towards it. Like I think about the conference, for example, like when we first started the conference, I kind of did the 6 months. Granted, it was actually more like 4 months, but still it wasn't like I got the idea and the next day I was launching.
Yeah.
Now, granted, the next day I was emailing educators, but I was seeing like, is there a market? Like, would people want to come and speak at a conference? Let me start an Instagram account and see, like, would people be interested in this content? Like, yes, that's my time I'm putting into something, but I'm not putting additional time into creating this offer and throwing it out there and people saying, no, I don't want this, whether it's the price point or like you said, like they just don't know they want it or they literally don't want it. I mean, there's so many different things. So you can start working towards it, but know that it's going to take time to build it out and to trust the market process of it versus doing it right away.
Exactly. And I think earlier you had mentioned that when you had launched the conference, there was hardly anything like that in the market or in the industry itself. So what challenges did you face at that time to launch this conference and to launch your concept and ideas? Were there any challenges that you faced?
There were. Some of them were mindset based because I was a baby business owner, literally 10 months into my own business. I felt very inadequate. I struggled with imposter syndrome of like, should I be the one to do this? I also wanted to make sure the marketing was really clear because I didn't want people to think they were coming to hear from me. I was the facilitator for these incredible educators that I felt like could educate on these topics, right? Like I truly was my ideal client. I wanted to sit in there and take notes at every session, not be the leader of the sessions. So I struggled a lot with the imposter syndrome of should I be the one to do this and put this on? And even now to this day, I'll struggle with that a lot. I think that's just as women in the creative industry, like we can struggle with that. I also struggled just with the back end logistics of it. Contracts for our speakers. Should we have, payment plan and contracts for attendees, like working with the venue, working with catering. I mean, there was just so many logistics to struggle with and to walk through. And I learned a lot of trial and error in going through that process. And I'm glad that I learned what I learned in those early years so that I can refine our process now.
I hate to interrupt this awesome conversation, but I have to stop and talk with you about the number one thing I'm asked about by entrepreneurs: contracts. They're vital to any business relationship and to protect your business. But I also know that entrepreneurs, especially when you're starting up, money is tight. But I would never want you to compromise on a strong legal foundation. So enter yourcontractbuddy.com, a website created by me with contract templates created and drafted by me and fellow industry partners. They're ready to use and easy to plug in immediately. And they are not restricted to any specific state. So yourcontractbuddy.com is sponsoring this episode, and you and your listener can get 10% off right now with code LAWCHAT. Yes, you heard me right. 10% off right now with code LAWCHAT. And now back to our awesome conversation.
So that's so true. Like, the contracts that you had at that time and all the other logistical issues. But more than that, I think the mindset is something that I don't think it's creative industry only. Any industry, women go through that a lot. We hold ourselves back because of our mindset. We think we're inadequate. It doesn't matter how educated you are. I feel inadequate. I feel incapable. I feel all these crazy feelings that are not true. Yeah. How do you get yourself out of that black hole of nonsense?
Yes. Such a good question. Okay. So for me personally, typically I have to sit in the black hole for a hot second before I can get out of the black hole. If I just keep pushing it to the side, pushing it to the side, pushing it to the side, it's going to come back at me so strong and forceful that it's like really going to knock me on my butt. But if I like stop and like almost like accept it, like respond to it face to face and say, yeah, okay, I feel inadequate. But you know what? Regardless of whether or not I feel inadequate, I'm still going to do it. I'm still going to try. And I have to like almost like look that fear in the eye, or look that like imposter syndrome in the eye first, and then be able to like keep charging forward.
I love that. I love that so much because it's so true. I think looking fear in the eye and hitting it head on is literally the only way to conquer it. Yes. Because it's always going to chase after you then.
Right.
And, today you might feel imposter syndrome for one thing, tomorrow might be for another thing. But when you've already overcome it once, you can overcome it again.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that's wonderful. It's such a great piece of advice and something that maybe a lot of people learn later on in their journey as an entrepreneur. But if you can actually tackle that in the beginning, it's incredible. And it gives you so much more strength to do what you're doing.
Right.
So with that being said though, are there any pieces of advice that you wish you had known when you first started as an entrepreneur that you could like now share with other entrepreneurs?
Advice that I would share. Okay. So two things that I can think about, like first and foremost. Number one, trust your gut. My gut has typically never steered me wrong. I feel like we can sometimes allow too many voices into our business, especially right now, because education is everywhere, right? It's all over Instastory, it's all over Instagram, it's all over blogs and YouTube and Facebook and podcasts, and it's everywhere. And that can be such a blessing, but sometimes I feel like it can cloud our own personal judgment. And we might say, oh, well, Kat says I should do this. Girija says I should do this. Caitlin says I should do this. Megan says, like, just stop and like trust your gut. You know your passions and your strengths. You know your audience. You know your offers, right? Way better than anybody else. So just trust your gut. So that's first and foremost, trust your gut. The second thing I would say is when you feel like you're struggling with the mindset issues, so whether that's imposter syndrome, fear, things like that, understand the triggers. Instagram is a huge trigger. I don't care who you are. Instagram is going to be a trigger for you with your mindset because you're going to compare and you're going to look at what other people are doing. So understand when that trigger can happen and what you can do to be proactive against that trigger. So if that means that you need to like not follow a certain person for a season because for whatever reason, that particular person is just, you're comparing yourself to them over and over again, unfollow them for a little bit. Like, I think that's okay. Just you are in control of the voices that you're allowing to like feed into your life. And if you need to take a break from a particular voice, you don't have to explain why. You can just take a break from that voice. Or if you need to take a break from the whole dang app for a little bit, take a break. I take social media free weekends right now. I started doing that a month ago. And y'all, it's been so refreshing, like so refreshing to say like, I can be so plugged into my people Monday through Friday, but then Saturday and Sunday, I can just breathe. And I don't have to be like on the scroll, or I don't have to be like Insta storing everything my son does, like running around. Like, cute, but like, it's okay. Just like, let me have a break and like enjoy life. So just know your triggers and don't be afraid to advocate those for yourself.
I love that. And it's so true because my feed that I have on my GBP Law account is very intentional. Like the people I follow is very intentional. And because I've seen that in the past, that it's impacted me negatively. And
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen. I also, as a person, want to grow. And I want to know that, hey, listen, when you're inspired by somebody, be inspired. But
Mhm.
it's not, it shouldn't be a competitive race. Like, they're doing them, you do you. And I
Yeah.
think it's so true that if something is negative or impacting you in a bad way, even though the intention is not bad for that person,
Right.
it's up to us to clear the mind. It's up to us to give us that clarity. The input that we take into our life is so important, whether that's a book, whether that's a movie, whether that's
Yes.
friends, family, conversations we have, things that we're seeing is so important because we need to keep ourselves sane, and mental health is so important, and taking care of ourselves is so important. So
Yes.
completely on point with that. And just to kind of talk a little bit more about the mindset, how important is your mindset in the brand that you're creating? You're creating a brand, and I know that you, at one point, you're like, I'm a serial entrepreneur, but now you've taken that back a little bit. You've taken
Mhm.
the reins back, and you're really trying to cultivate your brand. So what does that mean, and how does that look?
So if our mindset as a person isn't in a healthy space, so if we're struggling a lot with comparison or imposter syndrome or fear, that's going to show in our business. I feel like our brand will then seem unhealthy because we're not going to be able to give as much value to our coaching clients or to your course students, because you're going to constantly be like second guessing yourself or struggling with fear or struggling with imposter syndrome. So I believe that by just checking ourselves and our own mindsets, we'll be able to better love and serve our clients and therefore showcase a healthier brand.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And so that kind of takes me to the law part of it now, because this is Law Chat,
Right. I'm
and
nervous.
I am a lawyer, and I kind of want to dig into that a little bit. But I think it's so nice because there are a lot of times that entrepreneurs don't think about the law part of their business or even
Yeah.
other aspects of their business. And it kind of becomes an afterthought rather than something you're proactively trying to mitigate from the beginning. So tell me, what are some legal issues or challenges that you had and you were like, gosh, I wish I'd fixed this earlier? Or how did you overcome them?
So the biggest thing that I can like oopsie law moment in my business was my first season, my first year as a wedding planner. I actually had a bride threaten to sue me. Now, thankfully, I can like literally laugh about it because it was a very laughable situation. But obviously at the time it was not laughable. Like it was very
No.
stressful. And there was just a lot of anxiety around that situation. And there were a lot of things that I did as a business and as a wedding professional that I shouldn't have done, that I feel like led to her threatening that. Whereas if I had been more proactive on the legal side of things, that wouldn't have even been a thought in her mind. And the very short version of the long story is her wedding was out of state. And so I was super excited to work with her. It was a dream team of vendors for me as a baby business owner, and just the referrals that I could potentially gain, within the exposure I was going to gain was just going to be so, so wonderful. So in order to cut back on travel costs that she would have had to have me up there, she asked if we would stay in their townhouse, in their guest room. And so I said that yes, we would stay in their home rather than having additional like hotel fee or an Airbnb or like that sort of thing. And the night of the wedding, she's enjoying her wedding night, we were locked out of the house. Code was not working. Like it was a mess. And so we literally had to break into the house because everything that we owned was in the house. Like we didn't have
Yeah.
to like go to
Yeah.
the hotel room. Like it was like a weird fluke of a situation where even like credit cards were in the house. Like we had no way to even go to a hotel for the evening and then come back.
Mm-hmm.
It was awful. And in breaking and entering, one of their screens got like bent. And so that was where it then came to us afterward, like, well, we would like to sue you because you broke into our home and you broke the screen on our home in trying to get back into our house. So at the time felt very, very, very serious, right? Whenever somebody uses that word. In your business, it's very serious. Thankfully, we were able to resolve things after the fact. We were able to pay for the screen that was cracked, try to resolve it as best as we could. But it was a lesson learned for me to make sure that like I have accommodations are written and very clear in my contract, and that even if I want to save a client money, I can't do that. Like I need to have my own accommodations and I need to enforce that versus going about it the way that we went about it.
Yeah. Yeah. The S word. I love that. So
That's a
that
scary
is,
word.
that is a scary word. That is crazy. And, it's funny though, a lot of event planners, photographers do that though still. And so that's something I do advise my clients, like it's better kind of do your own thing, at least
Yeah,
where you're staying and living, because you just don't
right.
know. And you also don't want to be kind of, controlled here. You can go here, you can't do that. And
Right.
because that's your downtime too.
It's a hard balance. At least for me, it was a really hard balance, especially in the beginning of my business, because I've mentioned multiple times in this episode, our businesses are personal because
Yeah.
our brands are very personal, but we also have to draw a line and say, but we are a business. So like, even if I want to be best friends with my brides, or I want to really get to know my coaching clients, I also am still a business. So if as a business, I know that I need my own hotel room or my own Airbnb, or I have this mileage fee, added onto a wedding, like I
Hmm.
have to enforce those things as a business. There does need to be a line in the sand. And I didn't draw that line with her. And it really came back to bite me.
But so good you had that earlier in your career rather than later on in your career.
Yes. Yes.
So, because it's so important to have good business practices from the beginning, but those only happen as you move forward in your business and as you evolve, because you learn, and through experience
Right.
is what you realize what works for your business and what doesn't work for your business.
Right.
So that's so important. And then how do you set boundaries? Like, what are some of the ways you set boundaries? Do you use legal tools to set boundaries also, or is it just, your actions? How do you set boundaries with your clients?
I think both.
Or
I definitely think my contract allows me to have those clear boundaries. But let's face it, I don't think every client reads every word of the contract, So it's like, yes, I do have this backbone, right? Like if I need to
yeah.
reinforce something, I can copy and paste like from the contract. Like this is what it clearly says in terms of, how many sessions that they receive, or when we do their venue visit, or some of those things.
Hmm.
But I also need to reinforce the very important aspects of the contract in emails and in my correspondence with clients, so that it's very crystal clear. Because again, let's face it, we know that they're not going to read everything that the contract says.
Yeah, that's so true. That's also some of the advice that I give, is that when you are trying to set boundaries, it's not just the contract, and you don't just throw it at them and say, here, sign it. It needs to start from the beginning, onboarding, then further emails that you're sending, and then further
Yeah.
correspondence. Like it just needs to be reiterated and reinforced each time, so people do
Yeah.
understand that you are a business at the end of the day, and you're also trying to make money and make your business flourish as well.
Right. Right.
So, just a little bit about the conference that you had. I know that because of COVID, Creative at Heart Round 10 had to be postponed, but I know you went through different stages. It wasn't just an immediate, hey, we're canceling it this year. So,
Yeah.
could you kind of tell us about the process and how you went through that?
Yeah, absolutely. We learned a lot. We learned a lot about what we would do again if, God forbid, if pandemic ever happens again. So we did not make the call until the very beginning of May, and our conference was the end of June. So I know COVID started to hit in like kind of beginning of March, mid-March timeframe, and then April was really when a lot of things, continued to shut down across the nation. But we tried to overly communicate with our attendees by, sending emails, posting in the Facebook group, letting them know that we were keeping an eye on COVID-19, but that we were not making a decision to postpone just yet. I also tried to do the same thing on the back end with our educators and our staff, and sending them several emails throughout that like 6-7 week process. Just letting them know that we were keeping an eye on things and we were going to do what we could. We did have some of our educators reach out with concerns because they had like autoimmune disorders or very young children at home, things like that, where if we were to move forward with it, like they didn't feel comfortable attending or, being a part of it. And so we tried to, honestly, like you might cringe at this too, I'm not sure, but we tried to just kind of say, we don't really care what our contract says. Like if you can't be there, like we don't want you to be there. Like we wanted people to do
Yeah.
what we wanted to do because we felt like this was such an extenuating circumstance. So even though like per the contract, our
Yeah.
educators needed to be there, we were like, we're throwing the contract out the window. Like if you don't feel safe to travel, if you don't feel like you can be there, then we will miss you, but it's okay for you to not be there. And then what we first tried to do was postpone until later in 2020. And then after making that announcement, we heard back from even more attendees that either felt unsafe, like even just to postpone, because who knows even right now, like what's going to happen in the
No.
fall.
Yeah.
Or scheduling wise, like they couldn't make it because their clients had rescheduled for the fall, weddings had rescheduled for the fall. Like life was just really, really crazy and they weren't able to make that commitment. And so after continuing to communicate with all of them, we decided that we just needed to postpone until 2021. It would be the safest and best thing for everybody. And hopefully all of our 2020 people will be able to attend in 2021 and we'll have
Yeah.
more of a celebratory experience then.
Yeah. And I think that was a very smart decision to make also. And what about the venue or, where you were hosting it? Did you have any issues with them or?
You know, our venue is wonderful. So
Yeah.
thankfully our venue and even our rental company vendors, we already had two of our larger like rental companies like contracted out. I think honestly, because it was extenuating circumstances, like everybody
Yeah.
was willing to move things around and to do the best that they could. Obviously, they are businesses too. So they had kind of some policy set and some things in place. But thankfully, it worked out with them as well.
That's so good because I know there's so many wedding events that were happening and they were having such big issues, even
Yeah,
changing the days. Like venues were being really tough and
great.
boggles my mind because these are really like circumstances that were out of everybody's control. But
Exactly.
I'm glad it worked out for you. And going back to the cringing part, I wasn't cringing at all. In fact, I think I totally promote showing grace in business relationships. I think, yes, you can have a contract. Yes, you have a full right to enforce your contract. But if
Mhm.
you think that it's okay, you can pull back a little bit and you don't have to push on it. Do it. If it works for your business, if it works for your brand, I think you should do it. And
Yeah.
that's one of the other things I was really talking about during that whole COVID time, especially in those months, was like show grace because this is not about the end money right now. This is about your business reputation. This is
Right.
about,
Exactly.
doing service for your community, whatever, in whichever capacity you can do that. So I think
Right.
it's so nice that you were doing that in your business as well.
Yeah, it's trying to
Yeah.
find that balance of giving grace and also knowing that you are a business too, right? So,
Yeah.
for example, some of my wedding clients, like they've had to either completely cancel or postpone until 2021. So, obviously, if they've postponed, if I can still do the wedding, like I want to be there and I want to work with them. But for the few that I had who just decided to completely cancel per my contract, their deposit is non-refundable. Like it's their non-refundable retainer. But I just couldn't sleep at night knowing that I kept that full amount. So I worked with them and saying, like, well, because of the work that I've already done, I'll keep X amount and then
Right.
fund this amount. And so again, finding that balance of it is my family's livelihood, right? Like I am a small business. So if I don't have any income coming in all year, like that's not going to work for my
No.
family. But I want to care and serve for my clients well. So if I can meet them in the middle in
Yeah.
certain situations, I want to try to do that.
Exactly. And you just generate so much goodwill. And your wedding planning company is called Dear Sweetheart Events.
Yes.
Yes. And it's out of Virginia,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
I was born in Arlington, Virginia.
Oh, cool. That's like 2
Yeah.
hours away from me. So that's
Yeah. And I was kind of going through your thing and I was like, oh, Shenandoah Valley. Oh my God. I remember driving that route during the fall season because it's literally
yes,
the most
so pretty.
beautiful
Mhm.
drive.
It is.
Most
It is.
beautiful drive. So just kind of like, wrapping things up a little bit, but so tell me, how are you disrupting your industry? What are you doing that's unique, that's innovative, that's really a game changer for you or for your business?
I love this question. I love that you're asking this. So, I think if I'm thinking about the things that we're doing that disrupt the industry, my hope is that we're disrupting the industry by constantly having a heart for unity and by constantly still continuing to try to build community with the pandemic, with the civil rights movement that's going on. I mean, there's so many different things
Yeah.
happening that I feel like are kind of shaking people's core, shaking our foundations a little bit. And what I want to do is actually try to like be the glue that tries to hold people together. So if we can be that little like Lego connector piece in the industry, facilitating really awesome education for our conference, for our membership site community, for our, even just our Instagram account, like whatever we can do to just continue to facilitate, like that's what we want to do.
Yeah. And so you were talking about your membership community and your conference. How are some ways people can actually work with you or get your services? What are some ways to tap into Kat Schmoyer's brain and fantasticness?
Well, we have our membership site community. So we launched Creative 24/7 last year. Actually, that was one of those 6-month ideas. I sat on it for a while and tried to figure out like, how could we make this work logistically? Like we wanted a very low cost price point for people so that members who can't potentially afford to come to an in-person event, or maybe they can't because of their children, or they're still working a full-time job, whatever is going on, we wanted them to get practical, tactical education, like literally right in their laptop. So we launched Creative 24/7, and I can definitely give the link to you to share. Would love to have it.
I'm actually a member of it and I love it. There's a lot of value there. There's a lot of information that you're sharing. And sometimes it's just so helpful. It's just so helpful to hear it and to get some guidance. So it's amazing.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we are hoping, fingers crossed, that we will have an in-person conference next year. So if I can share even just like our waitlist info below, if you guys want to jump on, our 2020 round 10 people will be the very first to hear. We're going to tell them first, but then after that group, we'll announce it to our email.
Absolutely. I'll share all these links down there. And then just overall, your website has a lot to offer. You have YouTube tutorials also. I'll put all those links in so people can access all your information and just amazing content. So just some fun facts though. Tell me, what's your favorite book or books?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Favorite book. So business side of things. I just finished reading Essentialism. It's very, very, very good. Like productivity mindset. Super, super good. So I love that one. I also have been utilizing, this is like faith-based, but for the last couple of months, really trying to focus on my quiet time. I'm terrible with quiet time. And I got a Cultivate, Write the Word journal. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They're so, so great.
Love it. I love it. Yeah.
So that book/journal, really, really good. Love it.
So Cultivate What Matters. I actually bought her power sheets. Oh my gosh. They're amazing. They're so good. And they really just help you filter and, dissect and do whatever you need to do. Yeah. I'm a super planner. I love writing my goals out. I love crossing everything out. So it just kind of really resonates with me too. And what's your favorite magazine or blog?
These are such good questions. My favorite blog. So this year I am really trying to limit what I'm reading because I mentioned before, like, I just feel like we can hear so many voices in our heads. So business, my old business coach, Graham Cochran, I just love him. He provides so much value. And even though I literally did business coaching for an entire year with him, his blog, his YouTube channel is still one that I visit frequently. So love him for business. In terms of just like personal fun, I love to follow like bloggers, like fashion bloggers, mom bloggers. And Loverly Gray is one of my favorites. I love reading her blog. She has 2 little girls. So like she gives really fun, like mom tips, mom advice, mom attire, like things like that. I just love that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And then last one, what are your favorite business tools or apps or resources that you're just like, I cannot live without these?
Trello, hands down, 1000%, my favorite business tool. I absolutely love it. I'm a huge list taker. I like to organize, and Trello keeps me organized, keeps me on track, and allows for even my team, like we can communicate with each other in Trello. So love Trello. I also love Planoly. I use that for my Instagram feed. It allows me to do things on my phone or do things desktop. Like it just allows me to keep it all organized. So I really, really love Planoly. I also love Kajabi. So those would be my top 3. Kajabi, we switched over to Kajabi last year. And all of my education is housed in Kajabi and all of our marketing for the business as well.
That's awesome. I use Asana, but I've been meaning to use Trello just for me personally. I think it really also helps just for on a personal level use too. Planoly I use as well. So they're pretty darn awesome.
They are.
So yeah, I just want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing insight, sharing a part of your journey. Is there anything else that you want to share that we just didn't tap on?
Oh my gosh, I feel like we talked about so much. This was so good. Thank you, Girija, for having me. This was awesome. I loved talking with you.
Thank you so much. And just again, if we want to follow you on Instagram or catch you on your website, what's your handle?
Yes. So Instagram, you can go to @creativeatheart or @Kat Schmoyer. I have both of those. And I do all of the Instagramming for the Creative at Heart business as well. So you'll see me pop in there on stories and things like that too.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining Law Chat with Girija. I love these kind of stories and conversations where we can be real, honest, and open, and having fun at the same time. I hope you are inspired and motivated to keep doing the amazing work you are doing. If this is something that gave you all those feels and then some, truly motivated and inspired for you, you can show your love in all or one of these ways. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and share this video with your community and tell them about it, or share with somebody that can benefit from it. I look forward to seeing you next time on another episode of Law Chat, and until then, keep moving forward. Bye.